Well, hello, my name is Mayor Anzano, and today I would like to talk to you about a historic civic lesson regarding the three communities that make up Hopewell Valley. Historically, as you may know, Hopewell was just Hopewell over 200 years ago. It was primarily an agricultural community, farms, etc. And today we still see remnants of that with the oxen throughout the valley. That's intended to reflect our heritage as an agricultural farming community. About 200 years ago, Trenton, and we all know why Trenton's important to us, right? State capital. They changed the rules about how towns can be formed. And they permitted people like Hopewell, or the area like Hopewell, to change governments. What was developing in Hopewell at the time, again, as a primarily farm agricultural community, was that farms couldn't produce all the materials that they needed, and they needed to import things. And at that time, there weren't extensive roads, and there weren't availability of trucks. So they used the rail system. And as you can see, the rail system developed very distinctly in the Hopewell Valley area. And we have remnants of two train stations, one in Pennington and one in Hopewell Borough. So when the legislature changed the rules, it allowed these communities to decide whether they wanted to be separate communities. And the fundamental difference, as you can see, between the township and the two boroughs is the boroughs have housing close together. Township is still very agricultural, farm type oriented, with large parcels of property, very spread out. So the two boroughs decided to go off on their own and be their own separate communities. And as you can see, if you think about it, Hopewell Township is extremely large, and the two boroughs are very, very small. And in the parlance of government, we call ourselves the holes in the donut, because you see that the township totally surrounds both boroughs. And the boroughs aren't round. In fact, if you look at Hopewell Borough, it's kind of rectangular. But we're called holes in the donut. And that's how we developed. Now, as that developed, and we became separate towns, we all realized we needed to provide services to our residents. And so for a while, you saw all three communities have individual police departments, yet they all had individual schools. In fact, in Hopewell Borough, if you know where the firehouse is, if you look at the firehouse, that's the old high school. The high school was smaller than a house is today. That's how few students there were in Hopewell Borough. So over time, while we were providing these separate services, we came to realize there were some inefficiencies in terms of spending tax dollars on these kind of separate services. And the first most noticeable one is the one that you're living in today, which is the Hopewell Valley Regional School System. The three towns got together, decided to be least expensive to provide shared services for the schools. And we do that, and we do that today. That has to be going on 40 years now. We've had a regional school system. In addition, as I mentioned earlier, police services. All three towns decided to provide separate police services. And as time passed, it became clear to us in the borough, not on my watch, but in the 70s, that we didn't need a police station. Because as you can see, if this is Hopewell Borough, for the police to get to the other side of the township, they had to come right through the borough. So we thought it best that we just combine with the township and merge our police services. So we did that, and to this day, we continue to talk about merging and sharing services with the three communities and with the school district. We now share health services, we share senior services, and as I mentioned, we share the school. So we talk about continuing to share services in the best interests, or the least expensive interest of the taxpayers. You may come to mind, well, Pennington has their own police department. Well, that's the choice that Pennington made. The residents wanted to maintain their police department. They like the separate identity, and they feel good about that, and that's fine. As long as the taxpayers are comfortable with something along those lines, those kind of services will continue to be provided individually. So we continue to discuss shared services. Now, the other thing about the boroughs and the township, when the legislature let us create separate forms of government, they let us decide what kind of government we wanted to have. And you could see that very clearly or distinctly in how the governments are formed. I'm a mayor in the Hopewell Borough. There's a mayor in Pennington, and we are directly elected. People come to the polling place and vote for mayor. In the township, it's different. Township, you go to the polls and you vote for the council members. And once the council's decided, the council members pick who their mayor is. So There's a different way of doing it. The legislature allows us to do it, and you can see the 3 towns have developed slightly differently their form of government. Now, as to the form of government and other aspects of that, we recognize that we don't own the municipal building. We don't own the parks as mayor, etc. You'll hear some people say, at least maybe some elected officials, gee, that's my park and you can't do this or you can do that. That's really not the way it works. You own the parks, you own the schools, you own the municipal property. Your tax dollars pay for that, or at least your parents. They pay for that, and it's theirs. We get elected based on the fact that we come to you and say, look, we can do a good job managing this for you. And you decide whether you want us to manage it or someone else. So we're just stewards in this equation. And we try to do the best we can, balancing the interests of everyone, to make the best decision, both in terms of safety and expense or cost for all the taxpayers. And I think a quick example of that is it's really on the safety front. We had once someone come to us and say, I would like to ride my dirt bike anywhere in the parks in Hopewell Borough. And you know, in some extent, you assume they were going to operate safely, and it seems reasonable. But then when you balance that against the consideration of everyone else in the borough who uses the parks, there's a real safety concern, or there should be a safety concern, about the other individuals. So we had to tell these people, no, you cannot ride your dirt bike just in the parks. You have to stay on the trails, you have to stay on the road, you have to stay on the appropriate areas that are suited for dirt bikes. And that was the balancing act that we do as people who you entrust to manage your affairs in government. So, and then the only other thing I would like to say is I've been doing this now for over 12 years. It's very rewarding and truly enjoy doing it. I would encourage all of you to volunteer at any level, not necessarily run for office, but do clubs, service to the community, and give back as best you can. Use your talents. I mean, feel free to be in your comfort zone when you volunteer, but also don't be afraid to go outside your comfort zone and volunteer. You'll feel good about yourself, you will help the community, and we'll all be better off for it. So that's my presentation. Now, one thing I did forget, and this will be important later on, is when I spoke about the trains bringing in things that the community couldn't produce, one of those things, it's kind of random, I brought with me today is a coconut. You may say, why a coconut? Well, I had it at home and it had nothing else to do with it, but it was just such an exotic thing that I was going to use an example of what trains would bring into the farming community that the farming community could not produce themselves. So thank you for that, and just in summing up, in case there's a quiz on this, I want you to remember 3 things. Donut hole, coconut, and for no particular reason, I brought a bobblehead with me. So that's all for the quiz. So thank you.